Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Former Jamaica College principal Ruel Reid to be paid more than $20 million in settlement agreement. Tension over seating arrangement for George Wright in Parliament. And later in sports, West Indies on the brink of massive defeat against Sri Lanka. I'm Shane Masters. Here are the details. Former Education Minister Ruel Reid is to be paid $23.2 million. This is under the agreement which led to his resignation as principal of Jamaica College last Saturday. The Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools believes the Education Act of 1980 was exploited to reach such a settlement with former Education Minister Ruel Reid.
I know that there are many persons who are maybe peeved about the amount in terms of settlement. To be honest, for me, it is a matter, but I think of greater concern is the stability of the school, and maybe the decision was made in the interest of that. It does not exonerate the fact that I think there was, I don't feel good faith was involved in all of this from the former minister's standpoint.
According to a statement issued late last night by the Jamaica College Trust, a little over $16 million will be paid by the Ministry of Education. In order to close the gap in what was being negotiated, the Jamaica College Trust agreed to provide $7.1 million. The statement says neither Jamaica College nor the board has paid or is to pay any funds as part of a settlement. The Jamaica College Trust says, consistent with its policy of utilizing funds for the long-term benefit of the school, it concluded that assisting to close the Ruel Reid chapter was an appropriate use of the money. The deal has again raised questions about the Education Act of 1980. Education Minister Favour Williams has disclosed that there are reforms being made to the Act to deal with situations such as a controversy surrounding the leave arrangements for the former Education Minister. In the meantime, President of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools, Ruel Reid, says the reforms being talked about now could have been dealt with years ago before a situation like this arose.
I believe that governments who have gall and balls need to stop this thing to say that teachers are stopping it or civil servants are stopping it. They are there to govern, and if it is that they figure that it's going to be in the best interest of people, I think it's kind of sometimes dishonest when they do this thing to say because people don't want. What it seems to me that all governments have known is that if they make teachers feel unhappy about things, then they have to face it at the ballot. What I find is that governments, if it is that they are convinced that something is in the best interest of the country, what matters for them most of all is what is in the best interest of their vote. And all of the former ministers who would have been in positions to actually change this when they go in Parliament with a majority should not be blaming principals and teachers. We are not responsible for that.
Mr. Wright was speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106. The opposition continues to take issue with the seating arrangements for Westmoreland Central Member of Parliament, George Wright. There was an uproar in the House last evening when Mr. Wright rose to speak on the extension of a state of emergency. Codian Barrett has more.
It seems the opposition will never be comfortable with Westmoreland Central Member of Parliament George Wright sitting on its side of the aisle in the House of Representatives. Mr. Wright on Tuesday rose to make a contribution to the debate on the resolution for the extension of the state of emergency. But even before he began, members of the People's National Party started to protest.
Madam Speaker, let me say this. This is, please, Madam Speaker, this is the basic reason. We have a flow of a debate. The opposition, the opposition is speaking. He's not a member of the opposition. He's not a member of the opposition.
Madam Speaker, will you
the
please
opposition is giving its views.
I think that we have to get it right. And the opposition needs to appreciate that the opposition is not a party opposition. It's members of this House that are not part of the government side of the House. They are opposition. And therefore, it is a right of every member to speak. And when the Speaker of the House catches the eye of a member and indicate to that member to speak, the member has the floor.
Mr. Wright later voiced his support for extension of the measures, in contrast to others on his side of the House.
the residents of the different communities have concerns about the killings that is taking place in Westmoreland. And as such, Madam Speaker, I'm very disappointed to hear my colleagues are saying that they are not in support of the SOE.
Mr. Reid has been sitting on the opposition benches since resigning from the government caucus in the wake of an incident in which he was questioned by the police as part of an assault investigation. Codianne Barrett, TVJ News.
The way is now clear for the implementation of the National Identification System, NIDS. The House of Representatives yesterday approved Senate amendments made to the National Identification and Registration Act, which will establish the NIDS. The bill will now go to the Governor General for assent, after which it will be gazetted and become law. The law was originally passed in 2017, but was later ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, which took issue with some of the information required and the mandatory enrollment provision. The government was initially aiming to begin issuing identification cards under the revised NIDS in September. 50 new cases of COVID-19 have been reported in the last 24 hours from 1,179 test samples. This has increased the country's overall case count to 90,905. The positivity rate is 5.3%. According to the Health Ministry, 2 more people have died from the virus, pushing the death toll to 2,365. Meanwhile, 182 people remain hospitalized with a respiratory illness. 8 patients are critically ill, while 19 are severely ill. In the last 2 weeks, there have been 868 active cases on the island. 103 additional people have recovered from COVID-19. The overall recovery count now stands at 62,068. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. The Heart Trust NSTA is working to bring food vendors on the streets and small cookshop operators under the ambit of a food safety certification program. The initiative is geared towards positively impacting the health of people who purchase food from them. Sandra Williams reports.
On almost every street in Jamaica, there is a small cook shop or street vendor who prepares and sells food. Outside of a big entity or large event, there is little regulation of these small business operators, so many of them are working without certification. That also means hygienic practices are left solely to their discretion. To the Heart Trust NSTA, this is concerning. It's why the institution has started a training program primarily for street food vendors and small cookshop operators.
So we seek to find a common location to engage them, to do their assessments, and to be certified. We started this from 2019. We recognize that in most cook shops, you have 2 or 3 persons who are employed. And so it was difficult to get the large numbers that you wanted. So the idea came about and we decided to just find a large space where we can accommodate more than 2 to 3 persons.
Since the start of the program, 7 parishes have benefited, including St. Anne, Hanover, St. Elizabeth, Manchester, Portland, St. Catherine, and Kingston. The next training session is scheduled for St. Thomas. Manager of the certification unit, Natalie Taylor, says the program plays a critical role in reinforcing food and safety standards, as well as improving human development in the food industry.
Certification is very important for all individuals, and so we think that even though they are small business operators, it will boost their confidence. It will also help to bridge the gap between those who are not yet certified and those who are now certified. And also for those who have interest in terms of upward mobility, they can utilize those. I know too that the certification is very important for those persons who are seeking to go overseas on the employment program.
I would say this is a very good opportunity, especially for persons who are there. They have the skill, but they don't have the qualifications that are there to really, support this. So this is a very good initiative from Heart Trust. Go around in different communities, and persons can come in a more controlled environment to do their practical assessment. And this really helps to prove their level of competence.
At least we know that we are certified, operating a cook shop, So you have some people, more time they are purchasing food, they are skeptic on where they're purchasing their food. If you're not certified, they don't really want to purchase it there. So we just make sure that we are certified and operating well.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
As the Christmas season approaches, growing calls for the government to implement the new Road Traffic Act. The act was passed more than 3 years ago. It requires regulations, among other things, which would see it finally commissioned and utilized by government agencies. But opposition spokesman on transport, Michael Phillips, argues that the critical piece of legislation is seemingly not a priority for the government.
The government has not shown the urgency in bringing these legislations to Parliament. We have been waiting a long time. We have heard for the last 2 years from the Minister of Transport and the Prime Minister in some pronouncements in the House of bringing the Transport Authority Act for updating in Parliament. We have no indication of when that is to come.
And it's now time for the Business Minute. Here's Cody and Barrett.
In the financial world, VM Investments is set to acquire Republic Funds Barbados Incorporated. The transaction is subject to the approval of regulators in Barbados and Jamaica. When the transaction is approved by regulators and upon completion of the share transfer process, VM will notify mutual fund shareholders of the change in ownership. The regulatory approval process is expected to be completed within 6 to 9 months, but could be extended depending on various factors. And in business internationally, Samsung is planning to build a $17 billion semiconductor manufacturing facility in Texas as part of efforts to tackle a global shortage of chips. It is the South Korean electronics giant's biggest ever U.S. investment. The plant is expected to create 2,000 technology industry jobs, with construction starting early next year. Samsung, like several of its rivals, is racing to expand chip making in the U.S. to tackle supply chain issues. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's health report.
In this evening's health report, we look at sexually transmitted infections.
Women, they actually don't present much with symptoms. It's actually more of the males than the females that present with actual symptoms. So women could be carrying around the bug, but don't know that they have it. All right. So they are the ones who are more likely to have it over a longer period of time and not know.
That's the health report in Primetime News at 7. And now for today's Healthy Living tip. Get a vaccination for hepatitis B. Get tested for HIV. And if you have a problem with drug or alcohol abuse, get help.
It's now time for the top regional and international stories with Sandy Williams.
In the region, the Barbados-based Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, has announced plans to stage a 2-day virtual Caribbean conference on corruption, compliance, and cybercrime. The conference will begin on December 7. The CDB said the conference will allow for thought leaders from across the world to share and discuss new challenges and solutions for corruption, compliance, and cybercrime in the Caribbean. It said the speakers will include experienced global anti-corruption practitioners, anti-money laundering specialists, cybercrime professionals, development bankers, policymakers, regulators, law enforcement personnel, academics, private sector representatives, and civil society leaders. On the international scene, as of Wednesday, employees in Germany must provide proof of vaccination or COVID-free status or face not being paid. Under new legislation, the National Infection Protection Law, German employees will have to check the so-called 3G status of their employees every day. This is part of new measures aimed at curbing the country's fourth wave of infections. Those who refuse to present their status will not be allowed to enter the workplace, and the employer can legally stop paying them. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Sandy Williams.
And we head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your Midday Sports Report. Renata Brown is here.
Welcome back. It's now time for your Midday Sports. Rain may have delayed the fate of the West Indies as they reached stumps on day 4 of their first test against Sri Lanka, reeling at 52 for 6. Set 348 runs to win, the Caribbean side was reduced to 18 for 6, their lowest ever score for the loss of 6 wickets in a test innings. Craig Brathwaite 0, Jermaine Blackwood 9, Shea Hope 3, Roston Chase 1, Kyle Mears 2, and Jason Holder for a first ball duck all went inside the first 12 overs. Jamaican Nkrumah Bonner 18 and Joshua Da Silva 15 then combined with a 34-run unbroken 7th wicket partnership to push the Windies beyond their lowest test score of 47 against England in 2004. Ramesh Mendis has so far bagged 4 for 17, while Lasith Mbuldenya has 2 for 18. Earlier, resuming at 224 for 9, the Windies made 230 all out, giving Sri Lanka a 156-run first innings lead. The hosts then posted 191 for 4 declared, with Dimut Karunaratne 83 and Angela Matthews 69 the top scorers. And Manchester City will look to secure their place in the knockout round of the UEFA Champions League when they host Paris Saint-Germain at the Etihad Stadium today at 3. A win for either team would cement their place in the next round, but a draw could see both taking qualification to the final group game. City, who lost 2-0 to PSG in the first meeting, currently leads Group A with 9 points, with the French side second on 8. In the other group game, Club Brugge will host RB Leipzig also at 3 p.m. In Group D, Sheriff will play Real Madrid at 3 p.m, while Inter Milan takes on Shakhtar Donetsk at 12:45. In Group B, Liverpool, who have already qualified for the next round, will host FC Porto, while Atletico Madrid are at home to AC Milan. In the other games, Dortmund are on the road to Sporting at 3 p.m, while Besiktas host Ajax at 12:45. And France and Real Madrid striker Karim Benzema has been found guilty of conspiring to blackmail a fellow French footballer with a sex tape. A judge handed Benzema a 1-year suspended jail term and ordered him to pay a £63,000 fine. Benzema, who is 33, was one of 5 people put on trial last month over an attempt to extort Frenchman and then teammate Mathieu Valbuena. The scandal has stunned the football community in France, and both players lost their national team places. In basketball, Golden State Warriors player Klay Thompson participated in a full team practice on Tuesday for the first time since tearing his left ACL in Game 6 of the 2019 NBA Finals and his right Achilles in November 2020. Thompson, who was cleared for 5-on-5 work with members of the Warriors support staff last week, has been in great spirits as his return to the floor inches closer. While the Warriors have been hopeful that Thompson could return ahead of Christmas, coach Steve Kerr reiterated Tuesday that no return date has been set, and they want Thompson to continue to build up his strength and stamina after being off the floor for so long. And finally, the New York Knicks held off a second-half resurgence by the Los Angeles Lakers to edge to a 106-100 win in the NBA on Tuesday night. The Lakers fought back from a 25-point deficit to level in the third quarter, but Emmanuel quickly scored 4 3-pointers in the fourth to seal the Knicks' win. Elsewhere on Tuesday, the Dallas Mavericks beat the Los Angeles Clippers 112-104 after overtime forced by 2 Clippers 3-pointers in the last 5 seconds of normal time by Reggie Jackson and also Paul George. The Miami Heat staged a late comeback to beat the Detroit Pistons 100-92, while the Portland Trail Blazers won 119-100 against the Denver Nuggets. And that's it for your Midday Sports Report. O'Shane, it's back to you.
Thanks, Renardo. And that's the Midday News. I'm O'Shane Masters. Join us at 7 for Prime Time News on behalf of the news, sports, and production teams. Good afternoon.